Good morning, guys. Marini here with another algebra video. This is going to be our first lesson in the quadratic equations folder that you guys can see right over here, folder number 12. So if you haven't done so already, please make one for yourself and copy over the lesson. Our do now here, the first question is a factoring question, just to kind of review that again. We have here a trinomial. I see there's no number in front of the x squared, so we can go ahead and attempt to use our AM method. Since this starts off with x squared, that's going to be x times x, and then we're going to look for numbers that multiply to -6, but also add up to +5, which would be +3 and +2. The second question is a throwback of solving a linear equation. 3x minus 5 equals 10. First step here would be to add 5 to both sides, which would make 3x equals 15, and then divide by 3 on both sides and get x equals 5. Now, that is called a linear equation. All the equations that we've solved so far have been called linear equations. When you graph them, they make straight lines. However, now we're going to get into a new topic called quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is going to look like this. All right, so two characteristics that I want you to understand about a quadratic equation is, one, you'll notice it has a x squared in it. It's no longer x, it's x squared. And the second thing I want you to notice is that it's going to be equal to 0. And when the quadratic equation looks like this, we call this standard form. Now the a, the b, and the c there, those are going to be numbers. So if you take a look here at number 1, this is our first example. Solve this quadratic equation. Now this might look familiar because x squared plus 5x plus 6 was the first do now question, and we factored it and got x plus 3 times x plus 2. However, now it's a quadratic equation because it says x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. The way that you solve a quadratic equation, if we were actually in school, I would have said, okay, guys, try and solve this for x. And I think a lot of you, your first step may have been subtract 6 on both sides, go like that. 0 minus 6 is -6, x squared plus 5x. I would bring that down, and then I'm kind of stuck. Some people might raise their hand and say, oh, Mr. Marini, combine like terms, 5x plus x squared, that's 6x squared. Well, no, they're not like terms. They don't have the same exponent. You're kind of stuck. You can't divide by anything. That's kind of weird. Well, that's because I'm solving this the wrong way. The way that you're supposed to solve a quadratic equation is, first, make sure it says equals to 0, and this one does. In the future, it might not, and we'll fix them. And the next thing you ask yourself is, okay, can I factor this? Well, x squared plus 5x plus 6, we already saw in the do now question number 1 that that's factorable by the AM method. So do your double parentheses. I'm going to bring down the equals 0. X squared is x times x, and we saw that this was plus 3 and plus 2. Now I want to solve for x, but there's two x's here. X plus 3 parentheses x plus 2 equals 0. That means x plus 3 times x plus 2 equals 0. When you multiply two things together and get 0, for example, a times b equals 0, that means one of the things is 0, but you don't know which one. So I'm going to have to prepare for that by making a little chart here, and I'm going to say x plus 3. This one could be the one that's equal to 0, or x plus 2 is the one that's equal to 0. And now you can solve for x. If x plus 3 equals 0, to get x by itself, you would subtract 3 on both sides and get x equals -3. And on this one, you would subtract 2 on both sides to get x by itself and get x equals -2. So there's two answers to these quadratic equations. You guys are used to solving an equation and getting one answer. For a quadratic equation, you sometimes get two answers. The way that you can write the answers is in set notation. It doesn't matter what order you put them in, but I'm going to put them in this order, -3, -2. That's not an x comma y like a parentheses. That's not a coordinate. These are the solutions. These are both x's. We call these the solutions. We also can call these the roots. And I'll show you in GeoGebra how you can check that answer in a moment. But I want to do number 2 now. Okay, we have a quadratic equation here. It's got x squared. It's also equal to 0, which means we can begin x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. This one is factorable with the AM method again. So double parentheses equals 0. X squared is x times x. Now we're going to think of numbers that multiply to 12 and add up to negative 8, which would be negative 6 and negative 2. Now we make a t-chart and make each set equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0, x minus 6 equals 0. Ask yourself, how can I get x by itself? Remember, inverse operation, plus 6. So x equals 6, and then plus 2, and x equals 2. So the solutions are 6 and 2. Now let me show you, with this one that I just did, how you can check your answer. Go to GeoGebra, type in the equation, which was x squared minus 8x plus 12, and you'll see it graphs the equation. And if you look at the x-intercept where it crosses the x-axis, that one is at 2, and that one is at 6, and that's where we got 6 and 2 from, graphically. You can also hit the 3 dots and go to this thing called special points, and if you scroll up, it says root, 2, 0, 6, 0. So that's another way that you can check your answer. That's how you could do this graphically, but obviously I want you to know how to do this algebraically. I do want to show you guys how to do one more, and then you guys can finish the rest of these examples on your own. I want to take a look at problem number 5. Problem number 5 is a quadratic equation because it has x squared, but it's not in standard form. It's not equal to 0. So you have to make it equal to 0. So we want to take this negative 7 and put it on the other side. So the way that you would do that is do your inverse operation. Plus 7 on this side and plus 7 on the other side. 7x squared minus 14x plus 7. Okay, I wrote that as a trinomial because none of those are like terms. You can't combine them. And negative 7 plus positive 7 cancels out. And when it cancels out, it becomes 0. Negative 7 plus 7 is 0. And now we can solve this, but you have to factor it. And you can't do AM here because there's a 7 in front of the x squared. Don't just jump to conclusions and go, oh my God, now I have to factor by grouping, because they all have a 7 in common. There's a GCF here of 7. So since there's a GCF of 7, divide everything by 7, which gives you x squared minus 2x plus 1. Put the GCF in front. Remember to bring down the equals 0. And now you can actually factor this completely because you have a trinomial in the parentheses. This would become x squared is x times x. What multiplies to positive 1 and adds up to negative 2? The only two numbers that I know that multiply to positive 1 are 1 times 1. But 1 and 1 doesn't add up to negative 2. But negative 1 times negative 1 multiplies to positive 1 and also adds up to negative 2. Bring down this 7. Now when you do your t-chart here, you're actually going to have 3 columns. Make each one equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. This one would just say 7 equals 0. And that doesn't make any sense. 7 doesn't equal 0. So I'm going to cross that out. We're going to write reject here. That's not an answer that we're going to keep. However, for the x minus 1 equals 0, to get x by itself, you would plus 1 to both sides and get x equals 1. And on this one, you would also get the same answer, x equals 1. That means the only solution here is 1. So I'm just going to open up my set notation here and just put 1. You don't have to write 1 comma 1. The answer is x equals 1. That's it. We did not get 2 answers for this particular problem. And you can go ahead and you can graph that in GeoGebra if you want. And you can check and see that the solution is 1. Just now, when you type in the equation that you got after you made it equal to 0. So I got 7x squared minus 14x plus 7. Graph it. You'll notice it comes down here and it touches the x-axis in only one spot. Boom, right there. It's at 1, 0. So that means the answer is just 1. So that's how you solve a quadratic equation. We're going to do this for the next couple days. I'm going to go into the Google Meet now once I get this video uploaded, and I will see